For the most part, each chapter of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is just a piece of a larger story, always building up to the climax of a certain arc that it is attached to. Though not all chapters are equal in quality, some are more memorable than others, and it's usually only those chapters which something major happens do people normally remember them. But if you ask me, the best chapter of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is chapter 443, or chapter 4 of Golden Wind, Bruno is Coming, Part 1. Now, the reason I love chapter 443 so much is just the perfect blend of panel pacing, little bits of character moments, and overall follows the theme of tension and suspense to perfection. And of course, it also has one of the most iconic endings in any JoJo chapter, if not at least the most iconic ending of a Part 5 chapter. So let's run down through the chapter bit by bit, and I'll talk about what makes it so great, along with examining the scenes from Araki's perspective when it comes to his fundamentals for writing manga. So starting first with the beginning 7 pages of the chapter, which include the title page. In these 7 pages, we have a lot of information dumped onto us in a phone call between Jotaro and Koichi. In this phone call, we learn that not only is Giorno Giovanna Haruno Shiobana, but he's also the son of Dio. Along with this, after being questioned whether or not Giorno seems like a good person, Koichi implies that Giorno's gangster persona appears to be a front for a more innocent and kind person underneath. This is sort of a demonstration of Giorno's late father's charisma, given that after stealing Koichi's luggage, supposedly selling it, and putting him on his ass in a fight, the best word Koichi can use to describe him is serene. The anime actually doubles down on this characterization of Giorno in its original content, but we'll get into that in a little bit. Now, structure-wise, this scene is not actually about Koichi or Jotaro, even though they are the centerpieces of the scene. It's actually about establishing Giorno as a character. Araki actually does this a lot with JoJo, usually using Jotaro to do it, but he uses the character as a measuring stick for the new character to get the readers on the same levels as the characters in the universe. But the choice of using Koichi as the measuring stick this time helps establish Bruno later in the chapter. But the scene also holds another purpose. It's the official narrative passing of the torch from Part 4 to Part 5, with Jotaro telling Koichi that he no longer needs to pursue Giorno, as he already got the information that Jotaro was truly curious about, which means that Koichi, when he returns later in the Black Sabbath arc, reprises his role from Part 4 as a minor character instead of the outlet for the reader. Now, looking at the scene in the long run, it just seems like a normal dialogue between two characters, with a lot of character information being delivered. Though, if you look at the panel structure of the scene, you notice that the two, Koichi and Jotaro, are speaking to each other on equal levels. No one character is overpowering the other. Each of them are getting seemingly equal amount of panel space, maybe slightly more into Koichi's favor, like a 55-45 split, because he's physically there, but they never really overlap each other or envelop each other's space. The only time it happens is when Koichi reveals the important information to Jotaro. And then from here, for the rest of the chapter, we cut back to Giorno on a trolley, and the layout of the pages heading towards the trolley are great. Slow, establishing panels, building up the setting of the trolley as a very safe area, as setting is one of Araki's core fundamental ideas when it comes to making a great manga. Notice the civilians around and the peacefulness of Giorno in the scene as he takes back the control of the story. All is done with the express purpose of making the scene seem safe. And right as Giorno is about to take full control of the scene, being the center of attention with a full page spread, his panel is cut off by the actions of an unnamed man. Here enters Bruno Buccellati, a character whose purpose in this chapter is to invade Giorno's peaceful domain and deconstruct it, and he's already begun doing it by cutting off his panels. And Bruno slowly begins to take control of the scene, first by striking up a casual conversation with Giorno over some spare change he found on the ground. And not realizing what's going on, Giorno does engage Bruno casually with his defenses down, though the more the two of them talk, the more defensive Giorno gets in the conversation, which is demonstrated perfectly through Giorno's posture in the two's interaction, as before Bruno enters the scene, Giorno is resting comfortably, defenses down, relaxed against the window, and he seems to be enjoying the small conversation he's having with Bruno before Bruno brings up the police. From here you see Giorno switch into his mobster persona, but Bruno keeps digging into him, not even fazed by the shift in personality. And you can also see that the control of the conversation is slowly being shifted into Bruno's hands, as the more Giorno shrinks in posture and balls up, the more and more space Bruno begins to take up. Giorno hasn't even realized by engaging in this conversation in the first place that Bruno has now made a profile of his truthful, honest face versus one of that of a liar, which is the purpose of Bruno's questioning, as they are designed to see if a person lies or what their honest face is like, which is done so subtly that the reader doesn't even notice until Bruno is explaining his lie detecting methods. In short, Bruno is basically setting up anyone he asks the coin question to because he knows for a fact that the coin is not theirs. So if they say yes, he then knows what they look like when they're lying. If they say no, he then knows what they look like when they're telling the truth. It's a win-win for him no matter what they answer. Which, when Bruno does explain these methods, he's building up to the climax of the chapter. And when Giorno shatters all pretexts that this is just a casual conversation anymore, by asking him who he is, Bruno immediately switches into interrogation mode. He has Giorno's face studied, and now he can ask him questions and know when he's lying or not. Bruno starts this interrogation by asking Giorno questions about leaky-eyed Luca's murder, absolutely robbing the control of the scene from Giorno, as Bruno dominates each page, getting both a full-page spread, and every shot with him and Giorno gets increasingly uneven, starting with a 60-40, then a 70-30, which builds tension as Giorno is the reader's perspective. So seeing us get dwarfed by this new character is intimidating. Along with this, the only defense Giorno seems to have against Bruno's interrogation is just to stonewall him and deny all accusations, which Bruno doesn't seem to buy in the slightest, and slowly gets closer and closer, until suddenly, the tension of the scene is lifted, balance of the panels is restored to the characters, and Bruno drops the interrogation, leaving the trolley, allowing Giorno and the readers to loosen up and relax again. And we see a physical representation of Giorno loosening up as he unballs the curled up fist that he had, but just as he starts to uncurl his fingers, we see, buried in his palm, something that shatters the comfort we were just regaining. A severed eyeball was placed in his fist during the interrogation, showing that even when Giorno is at his most alert, his defenses weren't enough. Bruno had seen through him from the beginning and had placed the eyeball on his person without his knowledge. He was severely outmatched in this situation, and while he was registering all this information, in returns Bruno from the window of the trolley, taking back full control of the scene from Giorno, making good on his promise that he's able to read liars by the taste of their sweat, which leaves the chapter off on a very strong cliffhanger, as not only was our quick-witted Giorno, who stomped the last two fights prior to this, been outwitted, this scene places Bruno as a very high-level threat in the series, as Giorno outpaced Koichi, a man who you can credit with being the major factor in why Kira lost in Part 4. For Bruno to just so cleanly overcome Giorno shows us that Bruno could be a threat as great, if not greater, than the main villain of the last part. But with that iconic lick, the chapter ends. And this whole 19-page structure of manga is one of my favorite in all of JoJo. And this is because chapter 443 embodies Hirohiko Araki's manga structure theory, which is detailed in Manga Theories and Practices, a book by Hirohiko Araki, in which Araki says that when he creates manga stories, he lays out layers of foundation to build a story off of. The first and most important layer is theme. And in the case of chapter 443, the theme is tension and suspense, which is based off of Araki's first trip to Italy, describing it as really strange and tense, as police officers near the airport were armed with machine guns and the ones on the streets were armed with swords, leaving Araki wondering if the area around him was that dangerous, which went on to inspire him to imagine situations where machine guns and swords would be mandatory in fighting crime. Him saying, "The more I use my imagination, the more intense battles seem to be in my mind." Then the next layer of manga creation is characters, which is done great both in the Giorno and Bruno part of this arc, as those two's interactions are based off the theme itself, but also the establishment we got at the very beginning of the chapter with Koichi and Jotaro. And then the next major element of creating manga is setting, which is done greatly with the small trolley establishing shots, which, as I said, help establish a mood for the scene that directly plays into the themes of tension. But also, it made for a great place to fight in general, as a trolley is constantly moving and its elevated platforms make for interesting and unique interactions with the characters. And then the final element of creating a manga is story, which again is done great, as Bruno's reason for showing up directly plays off of the events of the last two chapters, and one should always be building off of the previous arcs to keep the pace moving eventfully. And then the very, very last element of a story when you're creating a manga is the art, which you wrap around everything like a nice little bow. And even with everything I've said about chapter 443 and how it's one of my favorite chapters ever, the anime version completely blows it out of the water. Not only in foreshadowing the importance of the coin that Bruno uses to speak to Giorno by having it be the stand stat screen, which I hope they keep that going because that's a genius idea to have an item that plays into the story be part of the stat screen. I just love that. But also just small little details that add up over time just help cement this scene as one of the coolest in JoJo. Like with them taking time to establish Giorno's relaxation on the trolley, with him opening up the window, distracting him from Bruno dropping the coin that would then force the two into interacting, which is context absent from the original manga. Then of course you have the obvious addition of voice acting and music that will help improve the scene significantly. Giorno's voice showing signs of weakness in some areas, along with the nervous, awkward sounding laugh he has when he gets the question about the money. Along with Bruno's voice carrying this strange, creepy kindness, like he's overly trying to be positive to unnerve Giorno.
いや、いいね。君はマジにそうするだろうね。冗談とかはったりじゃない。わかるんだ。
But also in how Giorno is way more expressive in these scenes thanks to the animation. We get to not only see his shrinking posture in motion, but also the moments leading up into the interaction, his cool and calm demeanor breaks multiple times. Like when Bruno mentions that he can tell when someone's lying. Though one of the best major changes in the scene comes from the lick itself, as in the manga, it looks like Giorno is more caught off guard by the lick, versus in the anime, where Giorno is staring at Bruno the whole time, adding this helplessness to the situation that he's in. Overall, I feel that chapter 443 is just one of the best chapters of JoJo ever. Does that mean that Buccellati is Coming the arc is the best arc in the series? No, that's White Album. Does that mean that there's more iconic chapters out there? Probably, but with as many chapters as there are in JoJo, I always find myself coming back to 443 when I want to read a great chapter that captures everything I love about JoJo. Now, if you enjoyed this video and like to see more videos like it in the future, I have a Patreon at patreon.com/ManyNotTheBadGuy. And if you want to experience something even greater than chapter 443, well, you can head on over to Funimation.com/show/Shimonetta, boring world where the country drug jokes doesn't exist, and buy yourself a copy of Shimonetta, or else Buccellati ain't coming.